Welcome to A Cult of Personality, esoteric podcast extraordinaire at occultofpersonality.net. I'm your host, Greg Kaminsky, and your co-host is Rudolf Berger. This is episode number 187, featuring an interview with Helene M. Arts and Gabriel McCaughrey to discuss Anathema Publishing and the new edition of Pillars, the Scalding of Sapientia. A Cult of Personality podcast is made possible by you, the listeners, and by the subscribers to chamberofreflection.com, our membership site, as well as all those who support us via Patreon. A Cult of Personality podcast is also sponsored by Miskatonic Books, an online store that focuses on the esoteric, occult, ceremonial magic, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, witchcraft, the Golden Dawn, as well as dark fantasy, classic horror, and supernatural fiction. They carry books by all your favorite esoteric publishers as well. Just visit miskatonicbooks.com. Temple of Thelema is a true outer order of the greater mysteries, providing ceremonial initiation, structured training, and regular group work, all in conformity with the principles of the Book of the Law. An investment of time, effort, and commitment is expected from each member. Each is expected to aspire fervently to the great work, to dare, with courage undaunted, to perfect that work, and ever to apply his or her best effort to effect harmony within the order and within the world in general. Founded in service to the AA, College of Thelema seeks to guide the student to an understanding of the law of Thelema. Most especially, this means a deeper understanding of oneself and of one's true will. A combination of instruction techniques is employed, including seminars, written texts, and individual work. For over 40 years, College of Thelema has published journals in the Continuum and Black Pearl, as well as several books on occult subjects maintaining high standards in Thelemic education. Visit Temple of Thelema at www.thelema.org. Anathema Publishing Ltd. Quality occult books and contemporary esoterica. Established in 2011, Anathema Publishing aims to provide superior literature in content and form by creating a trinosophic relationship in troth and gabo between publisher, author, and reader. Anathema Publishing produces refined books for the true bibliophile on topics ranging from Gnosticism, traditional craft, alchemy, Hermeticism, witchcraft, to Luciferian theosophy. www.anathemapublishing.com. Now, in episode number 187, we're joined by Gabriel McCaughrey, the founder and operator of Anathema Publishing, and Helene M. Arts. Gabriel edited and curated Pillars. Both he and Helene's writing is featured in it. You can find Anathema Publishing online at www.anathemapublishing.com. Allow me to congratulate Gabriel on another marvelous tome from Anathema. The new Pillars is a thing of beauty, containing many excellent essays and several standouts, including Craig Williams' 2 essays, Helene's contribution, which he talks about during our interview, all of Gabriel's written and visual pieces, Wagner's essay, and Carl Abrahamson's The Mega Golem is Alive and Well. The covers of the book are magnificently conceived and executed, and perhaps most importantly, Pillars is an ongoing endeavor that provides both a stimulus and a container for esoteric expression, honoring that which shines in the dark, enshrining it in written form. If you don't have a copy, you should. Anathema Publishing has established a solid record for exceptional books over the past few years, and this is one of the best.
So, how are you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you doing?
We're good. You have no idea. We, this is we're connecting more and more, bonding more and more. Just came back from Witch Hollow, which, is a land that Elaine here owns. And it's a pretty secluded, woodsy temple and everything you want. Pretty much it's a mini paradise or like a Garden of Eden or something. Loved it.
Great.
That's excellent. Could you talk a little bit more about it?
Yes, sure. Well, the location, the exact location of it is kept secret. It doesn't even show up. It doesn't even show up on a GPS, which wasn't planned, but adds that air of mystery to it.
And there's no internet connection. Else you create one out of.
Yeah, no internet connection.
Yeah.
So basically, it's located in an area called Lanark Highlands. If you're in the Ottawa area, then that's about an hour and a half north of Ottawa. And the land itself was owned by a woman who was very well known in the pagan community in this area. She bought it about 45 years ago, and it was the home of her covenstead, the Coven of the Silver Wheel. And as far as anybody knows, that was the longest running coven and covenstead, at least in Canada. And it was also the birthplace of an annual pagan gathering that's called Kaleidoscope Gathering. That's what it's called today. It did start off on her land, though, and over the years grew and grew and grew, and then had to relocate to a few different places as it became larger and larger. So today it's the largest pagan gathering that happens annually in Canada. But the birthplace was actually on the land that I now call Witch Hollow that I bought 3 years ago. Yeah, so it's about 25 acres in the woods and a very old pioneer long home. I think it's 1845, something like that. And there are structures on the lands which have been turned into, one of those been an old barn that's been turned into a temple. So that's a lot of fun to use. And basically, from the time that it changed hands from Gina to me, which was 3 years ago, I did promise to her to carry on the ecological and spiritual tradition of the place. So, there's nothing that's being put up on the property that has, any toxic or plastic or anything like that is rejected. And the place is used specifically for magical work.
Yeah, and I can tell you guys, I can attest to this now, having been, it is truly a magical place. And it was very conducive to just amazing bonding and ritual experience. And yeah, so as you can, with a premise like that, who wouldn't be interested in visiting, right?
Right.
I was blown away. I want to move there, actually.
Do they do offerings to the land spirits?
Yes, which may sound a little off kilter from the last conversation that we had, wherein we were talking about the left-hand path, but actually it's not. They're not mutually exclusive. So yes, offering to the land spirits, and the place itself is very active in terms of, shall we say, non-human entities.
Definitely. Yeah, you can feel it too. And but it's a very welcoming kind of energy in a way. And just given we're a few people there, and all of us have somewhat similar pathways and leanings, but at the same time, we just we make it so that it seems like it's working despite the tradition, right? Like there was really a synthesis of ideas going on, so it's a very creative space. So I'm willing to go back anytime, really, and just try stuff, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to ask you, Helen. You just mentioned it's far off from what we were about last time, and then you said no, it isn't, and
right.
I fully agree with you. But could you still expand a little bit on that? Why it is not something different for you, and why is it not in opposition for you?
Sure. Well, okay, let's look at it this way. We'll look at it just in terms of a philosophical approach to life, or a philosophical framework within which we go about our daily lives. So when I refer to the left-hand path, and I think many thinkers say this, what I am referring to is that we're not saying that there is nothing other than this life. Right? There are some people on a left-hand path who say that, but that's not what I'm saying. So this isn't necessarily all there is to life, meaning it is quite possible that, we'll come back. It's quite possible that we've been here before. It's quite possible that we will go and continue on in some other form. The bottom line is that it is all a hypothesis. We don't. Right?
Boys too personal choice, really.
Right. Well, we don't. The bottom line is we don't know. So the left-hand path thinking doesn't necessarily say that there isn't anything other than this. It also doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other beings out there than human beings. In fact, I would say it'd be quite a stretch of the imagination to say that there is nothing other than us. That doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's pretty egotistical and bordering on rampant arrogance, possibly. So that it's quite possible that there are other beings that are living on the land, and we can call them land spirits. And since they're there, and we're using their space, or at least sharing it with them, then just like we would any other neighbor that is a human being, let's treat them with respect, right?
Yeah. It's not dismissive of the other, and despite your definition of the other, let's just put it this way.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah. And so,
it could be quite boring if there were no other beings around.
Oh, that's such a good point. There goes the mystery, right? Yeah. But really the differentiation would be, the question is not whether or not are there other beings. The question is not necessarily, do we exist in other ways and other lives, all of that. The question is, who's responsible for this one? Okay. And so that's where the left-hand path thinking comes in, that it's you can interact with other beings, but not to plead, not to ask, not to, give offerings and so on and so forth to get help because you need it. And that's the really big difference. I think with the left-hand path thinking is there's an acknowledgement that there could be other entities, beings out there, and we can enter into communication with them and, learn from them, get something, but we're fine on our own. We don't have to, right?
At the end of the day, you are on your own.
Right,
yes.
Right. With the more, certainly if we go extreme right-hand path thinking, you're damned if on your own, right? Right. We look at religious systems, we take your pick, right? You're not good enough on your own, and you need the other beings.
You're guilty by default.
Right. You're born that way, and you need the other beings to either save you or to make you better or all of that stuff. And that's a really big difference between the right and the left-hand path. Yeah. So you can have land spirits, and you can communicate with them and offer them respect. But you're still responsible for your life. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're not contradictory.
I want to thank you formally for joining us today, Helene and Gabriel. It's great to speak with you both at the same time, no less. So thank you for arranging this.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to you, seriously. I'm super happy just that we get to talk again. haven't met, like a few months back, not even. So it's a great opportunity. Very happy to engage with Rudolf, as well. This is great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, since Helene has been on once prior, maybe Gabriel, you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work to the listeners.
Sure. My business, or let's say like my day-to-day activity and work, is now more than ever deeply tied in with, of course, my spiritual practice. But what am I? Or just a human being, or just a pilgrim on the path? Like really an interested individual who's constantly a seeker. And it just so happened that it crystallized in my life through various degree of apotheosis and revelation and weird experiences that, I could have easily dismissed or attribute meaning to, which led me on this path that I'm now constantly discovering. So always in somewhat of a self-initiated state. And a few years back, a few years back, I was a musician on the road all the time. So it seemed like the noise, literally the noise of this life, prevented me from having enough time to reflect about my life in general up to this point. But as soon as I took a firm decision to distance myself from this kind of life, I thought it was going to be like, oh, okay, so I'm going towards, I hate saying this in this term, but maybe the boring life, or let's say like the normal life. And I was a bit unsure because like up to this point, everything that was my passion was about music and artistic expression. And apparently spirituality does something to you. And it almost like re-uplifted my entire passion for life and the beyond and everything. And that tied in with a lot of experiences. I've actually talked with Alex not too long ago on the Glitch Bottle podcast, but I had some experience as a young man that in the back, I was always leaning toward the arcane and toward the mysterious. And it just solidified once I had time and a bit more money, I guess, yes, to invest into study and be more focused about that. That led to me traveling the world and then having even more revelation, even more crucial moment, angular points in my development to eventually have the idea to start Anathema Publishing. That came about because simply as a writer, I don't consider myself a writer really, but I write. So let's put it this way. I was writing a lot of the experience down. I used to write lyrics before, of course, but always like filled with symbolism, always like trying to tie in with theological concepts and esoteric, patterns and stuff like that. And through the years, of course, I started practicing what I was studying up to the point where somewhere in Thailand came to me the entire, let's say, idea of the ecosystem of Anathema Publishing that I wanted to create, which means, of course, at face value, it's only like a publishing house dealing with the occult. But to me, there is a specific triune interrelationship happening there. I really wanted to create something special based on my take on somewhat of a holy trinity between customer, publisher, and author or artist. And based off of that, I designed, the logo and I got it made into a stone stamp. That became something real. I came back home, and the rest is history, really. I mean, to dig deeper, well, since 2011, Anathema Publishing is a very DIY endeavor, something I pour my all into, which leads me to meet wonderful people such as Helene, and to go to conferences and start to engage, really. And given the fact that this takes a lot of time, this takes a lot of energy, this takes a lot of all of my money, everything goes into this. I made it my life sacrifice, and it's a virtue I'm like very proud to work on each and every day. Well, how can I say this? This changed me a lot, so it became an alchemical working in and of itself. That work, instead of trying to say like, oh, I got my work on the side, I got the passion on the side, and I jam with the band on the weekend. Well, no, I flipped the entire story over onto his head and tried to compact everything into this harmonious relationship. So there's no differentiation between work, spiritual practice, passion, love. All of that is interconnected, interweaved. Even friendship now, like everything. So yeah, I made it my life calling, and hopefully we'll see where that goes. Hope
That sounds great. Gabriel, may I ask you a very pragmatic, practical question regarding that? Because we who work in the occult or in the spiritual paths of life meet many people, and also certainly it is true for many of us as well, who, as you said so nicely, are prevented by the noise of life to do what the real call is in the first place. And they would like to do exactly what you did, but how do you make that change happen? What did you have to sacrifice? How did it all start off? Because it's those first paths, those first steps, I want to say, who are so difficult for many, and who most of those who would love to do it, maybe not even all spiritual, but just get out of the noise of life, they are not able to. So what was it that kept you on the path, and what did you need, sacrifice or anything else, I don't know, from your end?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a gigantic question, of course. It's so hard.
I do 3 podcasts of that.
Yeah, it's very difficult just from being on the first person perspective and trying to kind of like look at my path from a third person angle and look upon the whole and say like, okay, what were the stepping stones? Because it's not just one thing. Of course, it's a multitude of tiny little things that accumulated through the years. If I try to boil it down to let's say a key principle or a word of power, and something I've discussed quite often actually, is resilience. And resilience, I don't believe I just had in me as by default. Perhaps the seeds were there, but truly I learned that from my let's say like family upbringing and my past. Like I will not lie. I will not name them per se, but a lot of people in my life impacted me with this amazing force, this insane resilience in face of adversity. So my upbringing was very poor. Very poor. Everything is subjective, of course. Quebec-wise, or from my province standard, I was way below poverty line. All right, and raised by a single mother with 3 kids on her own, and she was, I guess, the first inspiration to just like see somebody strive even with nothing, and doing an amazing job at just like raising these 3 kids and sacrificing a lot herself. That took years even for me to see that we had missed something, because I never felt like we missed anything. So that was the magic, that she was operating. So this resilience, of course, I guess, hopefully, to some degree, passed on to me. Now, challenges and the way you get punched in the face by life sometimes, literally or metaphorically, you'll learn a lot about yourself. Unfortunately, those lessons, some people understand very quickly, like a child who's crying all the time and nobody tells him that you're not going to, well, if you cry, we're just going to ignore you, all right? They think they have a power when they turn into what I call the victim mode, all right? So playing the victim all the time means that you glorify the hardships that you had, and not in a constructive way. Meaning, like, that's pretty much what I would be doing right now. I did have some hardship that I learned a lot from, but I wasn't playing the victim. I wasn't like letting myself down and bringing this up all the time. I saw them as stepping stone, as in like, okay, well, how am I gonna get back on my feet from this one, all right? Or so just like so not wanting to go too much into detail, but let's paint a broad picture where violence was a part of it, lack of money was a part of it, bad life decisions were definitely a part of it too. And nonetheless, I strived. Nonetheless, I pushed forward all the time, which got me to reinvent myself more so than never. So that I feel like I've lived. It's easy to say. I was talking, yesterday about this, but it feels like I've lived a multitude of life in this one life incarnation. But that's just like a fancy way for me to say that. In all honesty, it just feels like there's definite points where even though I remain myself, I truly built upon a foundation I had to deconstruct. And isn't that, metaphorically speaking again, an alchemical process? That whole creation and deconstruction all the time. So resilience through that process of reinventing yourself all the time. And when I'm talking about specific, if you really want to go specific sacrifices that I had to make, well, how about like choosing, quite openly, I still consider myself pretty young. I'm 37 years old, but, it's still a choice not to have a family of my own right now. It was my own decision of not to, buy a house too early, invest into, like contracting a lot of debt. All right, because some people don't have a choice. All right, some people don't have a choice, but I did have some massive debt at one time in my life because of bad life choices and not knowing how finances work at all. And then eventually, I grew tired. I grew tired of that Damocles dagger on top of me, just like in the way all the time of my projects and dreams. So I just like tied. I don't even know if that's an expression in English, but I tied my belt.
Tighten your belt.
I tightened my belt to make it so that I would have a definite plan to get out of debt. That was the first thing. I would say that was like everybody that asked me, how you started publishing, how get rid of debt. Just do that first, and you have no idea how much you can do with this. Meaning I don't own much, guys. Like that's just the reality. I have a tiny apartment. Everything's in there. The altar and the practicing space is in there, but also like the office space, and it's a tiny apartment that I share with my lady, and yes, everything else is by now I can say is paid for, but I don't own a car. I don't have a family yet. I don't own. I'm still renting. So a lot of things like that. These are small details, you'll say, but I just purposely decided that instead of getting the new car of the day, that I was like going to pour all my money into a potential business, yes, but really something I was just passionate about. I had no idea back in 2012 when I first released the first Pillars periodical that this was going to lead to something greater, and of course it did. So that's yeah. So
yeah. Thank you, but I don't think they are tiny bits at all. I think they are the key.
Yes, they are key.
They are. They're definitely.
Yeah, you mentioned the first Pillars, and one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you now is because you have a new edition of Pillars coming up. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And one that I would have, let's say, optimistically speaking, that was one that was on my mind for such a long time. Meaning like, and I do the same with the lyrics, even with my pen to this day. Sometimes I write way too much in advance. And the same goes for concept. Meaning like, I was trying my hand at self-publishing, at creating something out of nothing with the first Pillars, trying to contact authors and artists with no name for myself. So meaning just an idea, and see if the idea would resonate enough with people. And fortunately it did. And I got just enough submission to create something, and it started from there. But it was like really step by step. But in so doing, like I had the first theme for the first pillar, and I had like at least 3 or 4 other themes that I wanted to exploit, because as a seeker myself, or as a I refer to myself often as like an eternal student, if you will, because eternal in this sense that even though there might be a sense of progression, well, I refuse to sit on this. So that means like in my head, it's perfectly noble to be an eternal student, and that's what I want to engage. I want to learn of not only people but experience and everything like that. And even what I talk about sometimes, I'm way more interested in how this is getting distilled through something else or someone else and comes back to weirdly enough. Anyway, so to answer your question, since the very first pillars, I had this idea of a potential standalone edition eventually that would really be the overarching principle of what Luciferianism could be about. So I'm not saying it definitely puts the nail onto an actual definition, because I think it's pretty somewhat loose, and purposely so perhaps, but it's something that's very dear to my heart. The archetype or deity, whatever you want to call it or refer to, of Lucifer is super important to me. It's central actually to my praxis. And so I wanted to dedicate a standalone edition completely to that force, if you will. And at the same moment, well, what was going to be the theme about? What would people like share? What I wanted to be a bit more, I wanted it to be a bit more intimate. And I wanted like a direct insight into precisely the question that you just asked me. Like, what had you sacrificed, or what have you sacrificed on this path? I was more curious about the upheavals and the uphill battle, and the fact that, let's put it this way, in order to learn normally about a certain topic or esoteric subject or what have you, of course we refer to mentors will purchase books that are written from a perspective of someone who seems, or at least at surface level, that has achieved something, and then you learn through that whole beautiful process of grimoire, or that is fully formed. The idea is fully formed, it's out there to inspire anyone or even try to walk the same footsteps. But I was, we all know it's not that pretty. It can be messy. It could be frustrating. It can, and the same thing that I just told you guys when I said you learn a lot about your hardship. Sometimes you see, ceremonial magicians sharing about these kind of quirky things and kind of failures. They'll write about it in their blogs, or they'll post about it online. Now we're pretty fortunate to have this insight, but I wanted to do a standalone edition that explained especially that. What have you sacrificed, and what was the hardship you had to overcome to quote unquote overcome fate? But yeah, in order to make it so that yes, the structure might be crumbling once in a while, but that just showed you that you needed to use better, more, or better cement, if you understand the metaphor I'm using here. So it's just like a way to like infuse this with actual life experience, and kind of like, yes, there's indeed there is this uplifting note at the end that those people still push on, and they're still there to write about the experience, and these are people like I'm thankful to learn from also. And it shows me that we're all, yes, in that regard, we are all human. Even mentors will admit to like having struggled, and that makes it for such a fiery perspective. So the entire standalone edition, which is called The Scalding of Sapientia, because, I choose Sapientia because whether it's a key principle or a divinity, wisdom, Sophia, whatever you want to call it, Gnosis, that thing, that intangible thing that you want to give form to in your practice or not, depending on the leaning, well, this really bears its weight of pain, and you'll be scalded by that, you'll be burned, because like the alchemical fire, the only way to push through is actually to crank up the fire. So it's incinerating, and no wonder I can hardly recognize who the person I was before, because cranking up the fire will do some massive rejuvenation. But at the same moment, if you cling onto something at the specific still now, in the still now, then of course you're gonna feel that pain even more so, and perhaps that's where you're gonna be like you'll start to be in that stasis mode, and you won't move anymore. And we all know that motion is friction, and that creates the energy. So that's pretty much the whole theme in a nutshell. Of course, the way I go about devising themes, I just write down a couple of lines, talk to people, and throw that in the world and see what comes out of that. And I receive beautiful, amazing submissions. Sometimes it's a bit, askew. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the concept of the book. So unfortunately, I have to kind of refuse, I guess, or
sort of delicately.
Delicately, kind of like perhaps exactly.
Edit it out. Sounds nice.
Exactly. Well, thank you for this, Ellen, for stepping in. But so that's it, guys. It's like I love creating these small ideas that are by no means so original. It's just the fact that to have somebody who creates that debate, create that discussion. Like if you go to the website, I'll plug it, but really quickly, anathemapublishing.com. And if you go into the About section, well, I was pretty happy with the way I phrased the purpose of Pillars and how it's an open, neutral platform of expression for everybody who's remotely interested in spirituality. And all us guys can go in and attack any theme that I give from so many angles. And that's why I keep on going back to them and being surprised and even shocked sometimes that people have these opinions and life experiences. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique opportunity for people and a really great thing you're doing, especially as a series. So, Helene, you had a contribution to this edition of Pillars, right?
Yes, and I'm going to link it back to what Gabriel was talking about earlier with respect to resiliency. And I think that's part of the reason why he and I get each other at a very profound level, because although I'm not old enough to be his mother, I was through very tragic and sad circumstances. I raised 3 children on my own. And so, we kind of get each other on that level. And for me, it was about, even doing that in itself is a full-time job and no complaints at all, because it was, every moment of it was glorious. But I realized very early on that I would have to do something extraordinary to pull myself above the situation that I was in, without just, marrying a wealthy man or something, right?
Yeah.
So, I was raising these children, and I was in school, and I had my own business. And, anyway, long story short, looking back at that whole journey, I ended up with a master's degree, and I'm a mediator by profession, and I've co-written a couple of books in that field, and bought Witch Hollow, and really pretty cool stuff given the amount of work that was already on my plate, and that was due to sacrifices. I didn't go out. I didn't spend money on things. That resiliency was something that I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but that's what was building, the whole way through. And then what happened is that Gabriel and I met each other at Flambeau Noir, right? So there was a connection there with Shani Oates. And the whole thing just blended together beautifully. And I gave a talk at Flambeau Noir, and the talk there was called An Existential Crisis on the Left-Hand Path. And so I don't remember if I approached Gabriel or he approached me, or
I did.
You approached me. Okay, yeah, and said, hey, this would be a great addition to the Scalding of Sapientia. Would you be interested? And yes, of course, I would love to do that.
It was like right there. It was like it hit the nail on the head, as we say. And so it's very apropos. But not only this, but on a personal level, as Helene mentioned, there was something going on there. We knew we wanted to work together. Yeah. In a sense, she came to Montreal afterward, right? Mm-hmm. We had a pint at a pub, and just like this, started discussing so many potential projects too. So we won't get into that right now. But let's just say, like, Helene is a prime example of the life experience. And that blends with the theme, the sacrifices, the jaifu, that gift that you give the better part of yourself in order for it to grow. And then the fact of watching it grow actually is magic in the making all the time, right? And that comes back to you in various ways. But the way Helene approaches it is very refreshing. And then again, very stern. Is that a good term? Yeah. Like it's very there's a certain depth to it that you would not expect from this smiling lady like this, but it truly it is like as I've often joked, it is almost like an underdog type of like dialogue that you'll engage with people, because at first they'll be on the fence, and that's exactly what I'll go for, because it's not willfully, it's just like willingly. I mean. Wanting to create a malaise. The idea is just like, hey, how am I going to shake things up a bit? Wake up people and try to produce something that really has it stand on its own as being something unique. And of course, I am totally aware that we have so many beautiful publishing houses out there. That create amazing. I was a fan, I'm a collector myself. I mean, like my book collection is pretty much the only thing I own that I care about as far as objects are concerned. But also how do I connect with people to bring about something very different? And in that regard, Helene is right on it. So yeah, please continue, because like that subject is amazing.
Well, it was a fantastic opportunity for me, because, although I've co-authored a couple of other books, they haven't been in the field of the occult. And that's really where I want to be focusing everything moving forward. So I was delighted to do that. And, we can get in a little bit into the topic.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh, no, please go ahead. Yeah,
but is that even something that you want to take a look at, Greg and Rudolph?
Yeah, certainly we do. Absolutely.
So linking this back to what I was saying earlier, from what Gabriel said about resiliency, and then, my experiences with resiliency. At a certain point in time, I entered into 9-month working. And you know how these magical things are. You can't really talk about who you did it with and that sort of thing. But let's just say that it was a 9-month working. And one of the aims of that working was to lay yourself bare and to strip yourselves of all your delusions and all of that good stuff. So I came into it being, very strong in terms of resiliency certainly on the mundane plane, if I can put it on at that level. Obviously, many other levels too. But I had never done a magical working to lay my soul bare and do some work on that. And so that's what I became involved in. And before you knew it, I had what I'm calling an existential crisis on the left-hand path. And it was a horrifying experience, I'll be honest with you. And I do talk about it. So that is my submission for...
we love the horror.
Yeah, that's my submission for this Pillars. It describes what happened on this existential crisis that I had. because I really looked at the whole idea of right-hand path versus left-hand path. Do we need to even have those terms? Aren't they divisive? And, all of that good stuff. And I came to a place philosophically where for me, I had to make a differentiation between the two. Now, making a differentiation between the two, what that meant for me was that I had to acknowledge that there is no one's going to save me. Every single religious and spiritual framework that we have, and that includes every single left-hand path framework too, by the way, everything is a hypothesis in the end, right?
And isn't that scary too?
Yeah, but that's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yes.
Yes, it was terrifying. It totally unhinged me because I really had to face that one, I mean, I of course, I would much rather believe that, there are gods or goddesses, entities, whatever name we want to give them, that are there for me, that can support and help me, that will be there after I die. We all want that reassurance. But the bottom line is that we don't know. We don't know how we got here. We don't know why we're here. And we don't know what happens when we leave.
And
it's a great mystery.
It's a great mystery, right?
And funnily enough, and add to this, I mean, we get along so good, but that is still a point of very heated dialogue between the two of us, because of course, it'd be easy from the get-go to say that, then Gabriel must be left-hand path, but I've just finished writing my first book. It was last November. And Shani did a wonderful preface, and this is going to be coming the next year or so. We're going to be talking about this perhaps then, but it's an alchemical working, and so the whole differentiation of, let's just say, perhaps this particular existential crisis, I haven't had it yet. For me, I have even a hard time wrapping my head right. I do know, academically speaking, what the two terms infer. But for me, I usually completely outright dismiss both. So it's pretty fun even to know that we discuss this. And I'm not, by all means, my opinion doesn't go this makes no sense. I'm actually very curious to hear about it, and it sort of kind of loops on itself and creates something more. And then again, we're talking about pillars, we're talking about Ellen's contribution to it, but this is going to be massive. There's close to 30 contributors, artists and authors. So that means it's going to be a pretty weighty tome. And I really I really want to go the full on with this one. It's probably going to be I keep on saying this, of course, but it's a reality. I want to outdo myself all the time. So even aesthetic wise, I want to respect each and every contributor by producing a superb book. And of course, it's super meaningful to me, but it'd be wrong of me to say that this each and every contributor's point of view is summed up by what I think about that. Of course, there's going to be a prefatory where I'm going to explain my take on it. But what is fun about this concept is to see each and everybody having this different approach to it, and so that will be Elaine's way of relating to the concept. But some people tackle the subject in so many different ways and surprising ways that it's not a choose and pick type of thing, but really it shows you the diversity of life experience and even the beyond. And then you want to talk about hypotheses, where right there you're going to have an old array of hypotheses, So I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
Well, hypotheses are great. They're always fascinating, right? It's about the human mind and how we try to deal with the fact that we're here and we don't actually have a user's manual, So yeah. I think for me one of the important things coming out of the existential crises was that magic Okay, so here's where we're coming to magic. Magic is something that is really sets us apart. So we're going to talk about magicians now, right?
Sure.
So okay, let's say we don't have any of those answers. There's no user's manual. Anything that purports to be a cosmic pilot or co-pilot can only be a hypothesis, or even more dangerous than that, right? Depending on how much they insist that they've got the facts and that they're the truth. So given all of that, the thing is, we can still, above and beyond the efforts that we could do in our lives as human beings, we can still get more.
Yeah.
We can do magic.
Yeah.
We can affect our external universe, over and above what we need to do on our end, our side of the bargain. We can cause currents to move in our favor. We can cause all kinds of things to happen, and we can do the same thing, and we should, in my opinion, do the same thing inside. We should be working on ourselves. That's the know thyself piece. Even more than we work on the external universe. So more on the subjective universe more than the external. But that was the piece that really, in the depths of a really serious struggle about this, it was really hard. Then the question became, well, what about magic? Then, what's the point of it if it isn't for something? Are we just fooling ourselves? Are we deluding ourselves? Or does this shit actually work?
Yeah.
And, if it works, then we've got a jewel here. We're holding a jewel, and we probably don't, we don't all realize it.
Hence why.
And that's the point of being a magician, is
hence
that you
why
realize
it's
it.
occulted.
Yes, exactly.
And also would add to that this really ties in with something else that I've been working on for a long time, trying to map somewhat like symbolically, more than everything else. Not only is it a cool metaphor, but it becomes a working tool. So I'm working on what I call the garden of the possible. And so everything that Ellen just said, like you're planting the seed inwardly, let's put it this way, inside at the beginning. And these instead of trying to directly affect cause and effect with direct outcome, like as you would go the traditional, let's quote unquote, the traditional route, the grimoire route, you plant those seeds, and like any seeds, they'll take on form, and you half expect what the form will be, right? You're planting a seed for an apple tree. You expect an apple tree to grow. But you're planting those seeds in your own little garden of the possible, perhaps just, the one that we ended up right after we got expelled from said Eden or something. Anyway, but so that new garden that we have to take care of for ourselves, that we have to mend for ourselves. Mend, is that, or till? So we're planting those seeds inwardly. These grow massive branches. They grow into something massive that is way bigger than you. So it radiates, let's put it this way, it radiates outwardly. And sometimes you'll find yourself surprised. You'll be like, oh, well, okay, this doesn't have the form I was somewhat expecting. But you'll be like, oh, it's okay. Yeah, that thing I believe gives fruit, right? And then as if you were to start back again, the entire process of evolution, you'll dig into, you'll bite into that fruit and hope for the best. That thing can be life-saving, save you. So meaning you planted a thing a long time ago, and now it's supposed to be sustenance. But sustenance can turn into poison if you don't know. It was beautiful to look at. It's poisonous. Right? Now, would the cause and effect stop there? Of course not. If you don't die of that one experience into biting into something that looked delicious and was supposed to be sustenance and then was subsequently poison, well, perhaps you'll develop antibodies. Perhaps you won't do that again, and so forth and so forth. So you can see where I'm going with this, trying to map these contemplative, mystical experience and really trying to go back at the root of the self by mending and by seeding that garden of the possible for myself. That also is perhaps ties in a bit with the pillars that I've been working on. because through hardship, that's exactly what I'm saying. Sometimes you're planting stuff that you're expecting something, and that's always a mistake, isn't it? When we're talking about magical theories and stuff like that, because to expect it too much really robs the magic out of it. Meaning, that's just a personal opinion, but normally I don't go too far into definition proper of magic. And I'm like, what if it was only residual effect of you putting the work, putting time in the work, and putting time in the betterment of the self? And if that's an hypothesis, and if that's a working hypothesis, because either way, working on bettering yourself will actually help you in real day-to-day activity and mundane task in life. So if that radiates outward after that, then the residual magic works anyway. It'll bring about desired outcome, but probably not the one you specifically aimed for. But I know I'm getting a bit off topic. I just wanted to kind of add this to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one might add to what you were just saying about fruit, the famous word by Paracelsus, it is all a question of the amount, if it is poisonous or if it is medicine.
So indeed. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Hence why, you just quoted out of thin air, and that's amazing. And hence why, I still think there's a good reason why people still use a lot of the alchemical lingua in a way, because it speaks to many, I believe, at a certain level. Because in one way it can be simple, and the other way it's quite complex. So it's always easy to go back to it. I love it anyway, but eventually we'll get to talk more about alchemy, I guess.
Okay, Helene and Gabriel, did you have any other things you wanted to bring up, or any events or projects you wanted to mention?
Well, do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yes, of course. Why not talk about the work while I'm at it? But just recently, I released a brand new book from Shani Oates, which I'm gonna send to you guys. It's called The Devil's Supper, and again, sometimes just manuscripts just fall on my lap, and and I'm almost shocked because under the cover of mild secrecy, let's just put it this way, we are working, Shani and I, on a brand new book that I believe people will absolutely look for. But she produces like crazy. She writes all the time, and everything she pours energy into ultimately becomes a gem. And so without me expecting it at all, she just came up with this Devil's Supper book that is a very weighty tome. It's massive. It's dense with so much information, and it's so relevant. And I believe it was required. So same as very different from the last book that I put out. Of course, in all shapes or form, it's very different from Entering the Desert. But when I get this feeling that I read a manuscript and I'm this is required reading, as in anyone who's somewhat interested about those subjects and topics would need to know this, or at least would be thoroughly happy or having this in their hand and as a part of their collection from a learning standpoint, from so many standpoints. So yes, this was massively important for me to put out, and we suffered a bit of delay in the production, but now it's officially out. It's shipping right now. It has an amazing a launch. Let's say the pre-order phase was very good, so that means that's always a good indication that things are going well. So I got multiple edition, of course, standard, deluxe, and artisanal edition of this one. And by the end of the year, of course, pillars. I'm trying my best to push for the end of this year, because the plan was to be released prior to that. But in all transparency, the only delay that I suffered is on the production side. Really, just so happened miscommunication, if you will, with the European provider of materials, of prime materials for the covers and the book cloths and stuff like that. They were closed during summertime, and my printer didn't deliver the information on time. So not going into too much detail, but I suffered a setback. So pillars, fingers triple crossed, that I'm gonna be able to release by the end of this year, or at the very latest, like at the very, very beginning of 2018, if things don't go well. After that, plenty of projects in the work. Some I can divulge somewhat, kind of like my my own book eventually. But I'm working on maybe like 6 or 7 titles at the same time.
Wow.
But that's gonna be released whenever I can, really, as I go forward in time. Many other projects too, sometimes peripheral things around pillars or Anathema. Same for the conference. Same for so many other things. Really, things are gonna develop. I really wanna keep on working on the ecosystem of Anathema Publishing and see where that leads me. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's about it.
Gabriel, thank you for sending us copies of Shani's book, and I just want to echo your sentiments. I felt like when I read the abstract for the text, it sounded pretty weighty and very interesting. Like there was going to be a lot of material there that would be, even if you didn't agree with it, you still want to read it and know what she's saying. Right.
Yeah, but it's not really an opinion piece either. That's what's beautiful about it. It's really like, how can I say this? It's really factual and historical, and it provides depth and context. And I believe sometimes we lack context nowadays. Sometimes we stumble upon information, and these type of reference book there, they can help tremendously, whatever interpretation or opinion you'll have about the book afterward. But yeah, just as a reference piece. These are amazing book to have. So I was pretty happy. That was the first book I released of such nature, really, one that is more historically driven.
Well, I'm excited about it. So thank you.
Well, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure. So what about you, Helene?
So what about me? Well, there's a couple of conferences coming up that people would probably like to hear about, and that I'll be speaking at. There's the International Left-Hand Path Consortium that's happening in July 2018 in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yes.
So I'll be speaking there. There will be Occulticon, which is held outside of Toronto, about an hour and a half north of Toronto. That is probably, I think, going to be late August or September 2018. So I'll be speaking at that, and I think quite possibly Gabriel will as well.
Well, that's going to be a new challenge. If ever I do this, it's still a huge struggle for me to translate while I'm speaking. It's getting there, but it's not perfect. So getting up there and just do a full talk, I'm not sure. But ultimately, if I do, I'm working on kind of like a self-imposed topic, really. But I'm going to talk and develop more about the alchemy of bookmaking, or the way I see it, the alchemy of bookmaking, and truly the book as a technology, as a still valid and very crucial technology for information dissemination, for the learning process, everything. This is very close to my heart. So
you'll be there, Gabriel. Okay. And then there's one more conference still in the works, State of the Art Astrology Conference. I'm also an astrologer, so I'm hoping to be able to speak at that conference, which will be in October 2018. And while all of these conferences are happening, I'll be writing, because there will be a book coming out under Anathema Publishing, aiming for 2019.
Something like that, yes. Yeah. But it should be very interesting, engage, and a lot of people are pulling in also, to add weight to this project. It's still way too early in its infancy to detail it, but stay tuned for that too. Yes.
Excellent.
So those are all fun things coming up.
Yes.
Busy.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. So thanks you guys. That was a great talk, and I feel very privileged that you guys would invite me on this wonderful podcast that I've been following for years. Even before I actually got to start practicing, it was a long time. Well, it seems so. When did you guys start it exactly? I don't remember which year.
Oh, man, probably 2006. It's been a long time.
Okay, so yeah, that must have been like the year that because that was the year I quit the band. But so anyway, thank you for the wonderful materials, because I've been following you guys for a long time, and now Rudolph, with Paul Hermes. Is that it?
Yes,
right? Very good. So yeah, you guys work. You put in the work. You sacrifice a lot, the time, the energy, and I believe like people should be very thankful of that.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful. It's just fantastic, from our perspective, and I'm sure for many of your guests that it's we get to chat with you, and it really helps us. It helps us to articulate things, and it helps us to get the word out in terms of different things that people are working on and projects and so on. So the appreciation is heartfelt.
Thank you.
Indirectly, you almost put me into contact with Craig, actually.
Because, wow, that's wonderful.
Because I had already read some pieces, I believe in Atwa, like one of the anthology book from Scotland. Was it Scotland and Britain? Or no, Tian Publishing. And followed some of his article on Phalanx back then. But I distinctly remember like hearing some of his interviews and amongst these yours with him, and it was completely engaging. I loved it so much that it created further momentum for me to act upon and get to talk.
Well, I'm really grateful to hear that. Thank you. That's great, and I really appreciate you guys, because really in the conversation today, I felt like you shared some things with me and Rudolph and the audience that maybe you weren't planning to, but that I feel like were really more like teachings than they were like an interview. So thank you for that.
Definitely.
Well, all right.
And we're eternal students as well.
Yeah, it was like something, I don't know, organic, very organic. But I believe perhaps the teaching aspect is not really in so much teaching, but the fact that I believe we're both not open books. Of course, we have our secrets, of course. But why not talk about personal life and things that can be like either good things and bad things, and share this, because I believe it provides context and proves that anybody can really engage in mysteries.
And the thing is that this whole concept, this idea of magic and the occult and the occultist has such a cloak of mystery around it. But the reality is that people who do this work and do it seriously put an enormous amount of time and effort and sacrifice, etc. And they're people like me and Gabriel. We all have our stories, and like the two of you.
Greg will relate, like there is a ground level. So we need to engage in this. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We are all kind of more or less open or closed books, but there are so many pages to them.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's so lovely.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. On that note, should probably wrap it up, but I'd like to keep in contact and talk with you guys in the future.
Oh, that goes without saying,
Thank
Greg.
you so much.
Definitely.
In the Chamber of Reflection, Helene M. Arts, Gabriel McCaughrey, Rudolph, and I continue the interview. Gabriel and Helene share some secrets for aspiring publishers, artists, musicians, writers, and other creative types. Their experience is invaluable in this regard. Join us for that inspired conversation. And I'd like to remind you that although you're able to listen to this podcast at no charge, it costs time and money to create. We ask you to support our efforts and the creation of future podcasts by joining the membership section at chamberofreflection.com or subscribing via Patreon at patreon.com/occultofpersonality. And if you're already supporting the show or have done so in the past, my heartfelt thanks, and I salute you. The intro music is Awakening by Paul Avgerinos. And the outro music is Lucifer by Stanislav. Until next time.
living hell.